Chapter 27. Angelique's Stand. In the familiar surroundings of her childhood bedroom, Angelique's thoughts swirled in a turbulent storm, seeking clarity. While she had witnessed loved ones face peril before, the reality of her own family, her very blood being ensnared in danger's grip, was a first. Compounding her distress was the unimaginable fact that her own agency was behind the menace, holding her parents captive. The blurred lines of the situation suggested that she might, willingly or unwittingly, be linked to the rogue military faction. Angelique's mind snapped into a razor-sharp focus. Her current attire wasn't suited for what lay ahead. She flung open her closet doors with a purpose. As she shed her exercise clothes, her gaze rapidly assessed the contents of her closet, searching for that particular set of attire. Time had dulled its vibrant hue, but not its significance. Her eyes settled on the familiar olive drab-green fatigues, a gift from old Jerry from a birthday many moons ago. As she grabbed them, an eerie sense washed over her. It was as if Jerry had somehow foreseen this very moment. She slid them on, fatigues from a bygone age, and then reached for a black sports top. She felt lucky that footwear was not an issue. She had brought her black tactical boots with her, and she quickly laced them. Without missing a step, Angelique reached for her Colt 1911s. As she slid them into their holsters, one on each hourglass hip, a calming feeling followed. Grabbing 3 rubber bands from her dresser, Angelique put her long blonde hair back into a ponytail and then covered the rest with a plain black cap. The process would have taken most people some time, but due to her years in the military, it took Angelique mere minutes. Catching a glimpse of herself in the mirror on the way out her bedroom door, Angelique marveled at how much her outfit reminded her of Tomb Raider. With an emotionless face, she said to no one, "Lara Croft doesn't have shit on me," and she continued out the back door. A vivid image of the vehicle encapsulating her parents anchored in Angelique's mind as she calculated its potential route. Her intimate knowledge of the vehicle's top speed, the gravel road's precarious conditions, and her anticipations about their likely destination coalesced into a daring plan. Logically, they'd veer left upon reaching the pavement at the road's end. With a newfound velocity powered by her surging emotions, Angelique dashed toward her father's work truck, her fingers swiftly enfolding around a pair of wire cutters from his toolbox. Pivoting with intent, she bolted toward the four-wheeler, its dormant engine soon to roar to life. A theoretical interception point emerged in her mind, a stretch of highway snaking just a mile behind her parents' house. It was a gamble, but the stakes were too high to adhere to caution. Her resolve, now as unyielding as the steel of the wire cutters gripped in her hand, propelled her forward into the nebulous circumstances that awaited. At a full run, and with the back of the ATV in front of her, Angelique went airborne like a cowboy mounting his trusty steed. Almost before her rear had touched the seat, she was off, cutting a path through the open field at full speed. With the wire cutters in hand, Angelique skidded to a stop and next to a stretch of fencing, which put her in position to cut without having to leave the seat. After cutting a hole in the fence, she drove through the opening and was off. She shifted back into gear and thumbed the throttle forward, pushing the ATV to its max as she bobbed and wove through the forest and over the hill that lay on the other side. As Angelique crested the last hill, the trees began to thin. She pressed her thumb harder on the throttle, only to find there was no more to give. It took just a minute to cross the field, with the highway bordering its far edge. Crossing the ditch between the field and the pavement, she let off the gas and could see a great distance in both directions. Since there were no vehicles in sight, Angelique flew from the ditch and parked the ATV across the center strip of the highway. With almost acrobatic skill, she spun up and off the seat, landing with both boots firmly planted, then rested her hands on her Colts, which were cradled by her thumbs. Staring down the highway at the hill in the distance, Angelique waited with the image in her head, placing them in sight. Yet there was nothing. After a few minutes passed, panic began to creep up. "Have I missed them?" she thought. With worry that she may never see her parents again, and still confused about what was happening, a question remained in her mind. What had Karnik got her into? Even though she was a seasoned veteran of many combat and law enforcement operations, Angelique still couldn't answer the question of what to do if the SUV did show. "Time to find out," Angelique said, as she saw the vehicle crest the hill in the distance. A plan wasn't formulated, but the only acceptable result was clear: the retrieval of her parents. As the black SUV grew closer, Angelique felt something that she hadn't felt since her first tour in the Middle East: anxiety over what was about to occur. It was common for a person to feel anxiety in a time of high stress, but the creeping anxiety wasn't helpful. It could only hinder her reactions and thoughts. Taking in a deep breath and letting it out slowly, Angelique repeated the process. Each inhalation, each measured release, seemed to wash away a layer of anxiety, steadying her racing heart and clarifying her thoughts. The poised figure she presented, standing defiantly before her ATV, hands resting confidently on her twin Colts, was a vision of raw power. The sudden sound of brakes squealing on the pavement behind her confirmed her presence's impact. Even without looking back, she could sense the surprise, perhaps even the hesitation of the vehicle's occupants. But Angelique didn't flinch, didn't waver. For her, the unknown vehicle's sudden halt was merely a backdrop. Her focus remained razor-sharp on the approaching objective, rendering any potential threat from the vehicle behind her a secondary concern. As the black SUV skidded to a halt, it seemed like an army of men spilled out from all sides, heavily armed and ready for action. It was an almost surreal sight, reminiscent of a circus act, but the stakes were deadly. While the swarm of agents regrouped and trained their weapons on her, the driver appeared to be in a state of disbelief, his face reflecting his confusion about the scene unfolding before him. Then, emerging from the haze of tension, another SUV pulled up, this one instantly recognizable to Angelique. Its doors burst open, releasing another squad of armed agents, and among them, the one man she despised above all others, Jonathan. His eyes, like those of a predator, were locked onto her, studying her every move, every contour of her form. Angelique could feel the weight of his gaze, heavy with desire and obsession. She had long known of his twisted fascination with her, but she had always found it repulsive. The way he looked at her, with lust and admiration, made her skin crawl. She stood there, an embodiment of strength and defiance, her physique honed to perfection. But more than her appearance, it was the confidence she exuded, the way she stood unyielding even when surrounded, that made her truly formidable. The two Colts by her side weren't just weapons but extensions of her will, and everyone present knew she wouldn't hesitate to use them if provoked. Jonathan's footsteps faltered as he neared the left front tire, placing him almost directly in front of Angelique. A silence stretched between them, like the charged stillness before a storm electrifying the air. He paused, revealing nothing of his inner thoughts, an emotionless mask settling on his features. "That's far enough," Angelique's voice cut through the tension, sharp and commanding. The subtle sounds of finger grips tightening on rifle triggers whispered across the quiet standoff. A spark of delight flickered in her eyes, the irony of the situation momentarily eclipsing the severity of it. "So," she mused internally, "this must be what they mean by biting off more than you can chew." She stood her ground, a solitary figure in stark contrast to the heavily armed ensemble surrounding her, embodying both vulnerability and a steely resolve that seemed to unnerve even the most seasoned agents before her. Jonathan, attempting to maintain his composure, locked eyes with her, neither willing to betray a flicker of fear nor relent in this silent battle of wills. Jonathan spoke with a slight hint of sarcasm in his voice. "Well, there you are. We've been looking for you." Angelique quickly responded, "Yes, here I am. How about you explain to me what is going on and why you have my parents?" Now devoid of any emotion, Jonathan unbuttoned his jacket, and with his thumb pulling one side of his jacket back, he placed his thumb in his belt, keeping the jacket pulled to the rear. Leaning against the SUV, he seemed casual, like things were just business as usual, but that wasn't the case with the others present. Every man felt like Angelique's eyes were staring right at him as she spoke. "Why are you here?" she asked once more, already tired of his game. Cocking his head just a few degrees to one side, Jonathan responded, "Did you think you could go against DHS and help your boyfriend?" Did you really think there would be no consequences? Angelique couldn't believe what she was hearing, but then she thought of how her situation might look to the DHS. She had just happened to take a vacation at the same time that a rogue military unit was camped out in her backyard. And she did have a connection with one of the leading men in the unit. "You've got it wrong," she replied with authority and emphasis. "I am on V. Don't try feeding me that bullshit. We have orders to bring you in and your family." "Orders from whom?" "From the head of the SCN." Jonathan spoke as if the SCN were the ruling power. Angelique was stunned by what she had just heard. When the SCN program had been first implemented, she had known that it would be bad. She just hadn't thought it would happen this quickly. With a touch of laughter, she said, "What? Are we governed by the United Nations now, not our own government?" Angelique laughed a little more, just to get under his skin. "Lay down your arms and come with us." Angelique knew at that point that she had Jonathan off balance, and she understood that there was no talking to somebody who had made up his mind. "Drop the act," Jonathan yelled. "Your boyfriend will be surrounded within the hour, and all of them will be brought in, dead or alive. My preference is of the non-breathing sort." Angelique heard a touch of jealousy in Jonathan's voice when he'd said the word boyfriend. She pretended like he had said nothing, but she did have a question. She looked at the man closest to her and ensured that she had eye contact before speaking. "Cameron, you served under me and trained with me. You know I would never do what this son of a bitch is saying. Yet you stand here with a rifle aimed right at me, ready to pull the trigger for him." Then she turned to the man on the other side of the vehicle. "Ken, we fought many battles side by side in the sandbox. Do you really believe that I am capable of turning against my country? Jeff, how about it? Do you believe I shouldn't have to stand here and explain myself?" Angelique let her head hang down and shook it a little. "So you know I was simply on vacation," she said slowly. Jonathan saw that she was getting to the men and that their rifles were beginning to slightly lower, as if they had lost faith in what they were doing. "Kill her!" Jonathan shouted out. The scene had taken a sudden twist that no one saw coming, least of all Jonathan. The sun glinted off the barrel of the gun Cameron now had pressed so close to his face. The whiff of gun oil was an acrid reminder of how quickly tables could turn. For a brief moment the world stood still. All sounds seemed to fade away, except for the faint hum of the idling SUVs and the heavy breaths of the men surrounding them. Every pair of eyes was fixated on the standoff before them, the balance of power shifting like sand beneath their feet. Angelique's striking stance, with those twin Colts drawn and one aimed unerringly at Jonathan, was both impressive and alarming. The way she handled those weapons, her rigid resolve evident in her stance and gaze, made it clear she was no stranger to danger. Jonathan's eyes widened slightly, a realization dawning. She had outmaneuvered him, but he wondered when exactly had she managed to draw those pistols. His mind raced back, trying to pin down the exact moment, but it eluded him. She had been so swift, so stealthy, that even he, with all his experience, hadn't noticed. It was humbling and deeply unnerving.